Brookfield is pleased to partner with The Urbanist on Monocle Radio. Brookfield manages real estate around the globe, collaborating with partners, tenants and local communities to bring Brookfield's properties to life. Being part of the wider Brookfield ecosystem affords access to data and expertise across a breadth of industries, in addition to access to capital. A leading portfolio of real estate, with a proven record of adding value beyond the buildings. Success built on relentless innovation, leading-edge sustainability, and the highest standards of design. The creation of places that enhance the very fabric of our communities. Brookfield, real estate reimagined.
Hello and welcome to The Urbanist, Monocle's programme all about the built environment. I'm your host, Andrew Tuck. Coming up,
I want to develop a city that people are happy to come and live here, happy to work here, happy to raise a family here, retire and invest at the same time to make it home for them rather than it's just a stop along their way of journey.
This week we report from the inaugural Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit, bringing together global policymakers, planners and city leaders, shaping the built environment of tomorrow. From inclusive neighbourhoods and climate-resilient design to mobility solutions and destination development, Abu Dhabi is a city putting big ideas on the table and turning them into reality. We wanted to get a front row seat to see how infrastructure is being redefined in the Emirate, not just as roads and bridges, but as tools for better living, public life and global relevance. So join us as we hear from some of the global voices leading this shift and delivering better quality of life for all. That's all ahead, right here on The Urbanist, with me, Andrew Tuck. So welcome to a special edition of The Urbanist, coming to you from the inaugural Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit. It's been an interesting couple of days, and one that surprised some outsiders too. There are 600 key projects in the pipeline in this emirate, valued at some $54 billion. But the talk has not just been about what's being built, but rather about urban livability and quality of life. To get a sense of how Abu Dhabi is pioneering change and driving an urban revolution, I was joined by His Excellency Mohammed Ali Al Sharafa, who's the chairman of the Department of Municipalities and Transport for Abu Dhabi. As the organisers of the two-day gathering, I started by asking him about the importance of bringing such an event to the Emirates capital.
This inaugural summit is a testament of what really Abu Dhabi as an emirate is trying to showcase to the world, the size, the magnitude, and the level of projects in terms of infrastructure that Abu Dhabi is actually developing. Abu Dhabi is expanding in a very rapid way. Our economic expansion also is driving our infrastructure development. The number of FDI investments have increased by 300%. We are the safest city in the world. We are number 5 in the world most livable, number 1 in the world in Middle East most livable. And we just wanted to show people what are we doing and how we can leverage their experience and expertise in developing our infrastructure projects.
Now, one of the really fascinating things is often when people talk about infrastructure, we understand it's for the economy and for mobility, but you also have a keen focus on livability, quality of life, wellness. Why has this come to the top of the pile, as it were, in needs for Abu Dhabi as well?
Well, I think it's twofold. Number one, I think to differentiate Abu Dhabi from other cities or emirates was very important for us to be different. It's not all about the hard infrastructure. We thought of how we create the right environment, life for people that are resident and nationals in Abu Dhabi by looking at the soft infrastructure that nobody have looked at for quite some time in the world, to be honest with you. So we've been working on this model and creating an algorithm for every district in Abu Dhabi and identifying specifically what are the key requirements for every district. Either from, I'm not going to talk about the physical infrastructure or hard infrastructure because that's a given. But from a livability point of view, we look at healthcare, we look at walkability, we look about nature, parks, we look about active participation of the community in sports, obesity, healthcare. There is a lot of data points that we managed to capture and understand what really districts are looking for. And this is where we wanted to showcase, because the whole aim of creating all of this is I want to develop a city that people are happy to come and live here, happy to work here, happy to raise a family here, retire and invest at the same time, to make it home for them rather than it's just a stop along their way of journey.
And tell me, with that data, as you collect it, I know that the region has been very good at using AI tools and new technology to think about healthcare, for example, and how that fits in with urban planning. So you sit in a fascinating spot because your infrastructure, but it's probably the first time that anybody in your position has accessed that kind of information.
And I'll tell you, this has been an enormous advantage to us, and we appreciate what our leadership have enabled the other entities, government entities and institutions to have a single data lake that we can actually capture these data from other entities as well. So it gives us a lot of faster intervention, gives us more real insights to an extent, and being much closer to the people that are living there to understand their requirements, their needs.
And tell me also, when you're thinking about infrastructure, obviously the Grand Projets are all important, and you're building some extraordinary masterpieces here, whether it's in culture or in architecture. But it's the bits in between that matter, as well as you've talked about how we connect, how we make public realm. Is that also something you think about as you build this infrastructure, as you add in some walkability, even when you're in a very hot country?
And we had to look and improvise and come up with new ideas how we connect districts or areas between each other and make it much more easier for people to walk, easier for people to cycle from home to work, from work to another place. But don't forget, we are in a part of the world that is humidity and heat is an issue. But we found a lot of engineering ways how to make it more conditioned for people to use such networks rather than only using your car or public transport, even though these are also an important network connectors. But we believe having options and choice for people to either walk to work, take a bicycle to work, or using a public transport which is easy for them to use is important for us to create that livability component.
Tell us, our listeners, a project that is ongoing or that's been delivered that you think kind of sums up some of the principles that you're trying to bring to the front.
I'll give you two projects. One, which is enhancing an existing area that's been downtown Abu Dhabi for quite some time that needed an upgrade because things have changed, demographics have changed, network have changed. And a new area that we are developing, which is the Zayed City, and this is going to be the new center of the capital district of Abu Dhabi, which is off Abu Dhabi Island, connecting closer maybe to Dubai. We're creating a completely new city there with government offices, with national housing, with residential and mixed-use facilities. So you have two different projects that are enhancing one or a greenfield. So a brownfield and a greenfield. And it's very challenging to work on. They are completely different projects, but the solutions are different. It's nice to have a white sheet and develop something on a white sheet rather than come and enhance. But I think our leadership wants to also continue that enhancement of livability in existing districts rather than only developing new ones.
I see on some of the panels today there's dispute resolution, there's codes of conduct, because you're keen to bring in partners from around the world. And here today there are so many people who have come from around the world to be here, part of this event. What do you need from outside? Because you have so much talent here now and so much skill. Most of the people in the leadership here have trained around the world. You have so many skill sets here. If people are coming to Abu Dhabi, what are the things still on your checklist that you want to see as you head for that 2030 vision and beyond? What do you need from partners?
See, I'll be honest with you. The sheer magnitude of projects that we are developing, which is based on our Falcon economy strategy and our urban plan, is a lot. And a lot of these projects are on a fast track. And it's not about only getting contractors or getting consultants or engineering companies. But I think we need to learn from experts that have been there, that developed fast track projects, that used partnership in managing risks, construction risks, and how we can move faster in developing our infrastructure. It's not all about the money, it's about expertise. And I think, as you said it nicely, we don't lack expertise here, but I think it's nice to keep our options open and understand more what's happening in the world.
If there's one thing this region does well, it's taking lessons from the past to find the solutions needed for a greener future. One person whose work has focused on the role of landscape architecture is Nadine Bittar Chaheen, who's a strategic advisor on urban policy and transformational urban programs in the region, and also the Secretary General of the International Federation of Landscape Architects Middle East. Let's have a listen.
Landscape has been a transformative force in terms of how we plan and design cities in the GCC, but also in the Middle East. One, our region is 8,600 years old. So we have a lot of local knowledge about water, about biodiversity, about flora, about fauna, about ecosystems that we can bring to the table on the global stage. The second one is we understand as a region, and we are actually acting on it, this intersection between livability and landscape. Because landscape, it has to be defined as the physical, cultural, and also the societal spaces in which people move and also have leisure, right? So that intersection is very important. And I think for the third one is place, of course. You associate a place by its landscape spaces, and there is a meaning, and there is belonging, and there is culture and community, and there is a whole world that opens up when you link these concepts into the way landscape is planned and performed. And the last one, which we rarely speak about, but is very important, it's a billions of dollar industry in the Middle East. It's one actually of the highest growing region when it comes to landscape services, landscape construction, and landscape design.
Okay, lots to unpack there. So first of all, I come with all my rubbishy Western prejudices, but when I came here like 20 years ago, I often thought of the region as developing fast, but building lots of projects, but not connecting them. I know that has changed quite a lot, but key to that is going to be landscape architecture. I know that you've got the historical part, but is the contemporary part, is that being embraced by developers now? Because what's been great today is that how many people are talking about livability and saying, look, we've got to be better at the landscape in between our buildings.
I think our understanding of landscape is evolving. 23 years ago when I came to Dubai, the first time I did landscape guidelines, everybody thought I'm going to do guidelines for gardens and green spaces. Now we approach landscape as a series of spaces. It could be a plaza, it could be a square, it could be a street, it could be a pedestrian walkway, it could be a biking trails. But also landscape is about the biodiversity. So it's not only nature, it's native nature. It is a nature that fits into the ecosystem, that fits into the climate. I have to speak about a very important thing and the white elephant in our speak. Urban development is mostly driven by private sector in our region. It is, of course, moderated by the government, but it's a partnership with private development. And I think with smart technology and smart data, we would be able to say, if you do this, you will get this benefit, and that will tap into sustainable finance. How original this sustainability link finance that's coming. By the way, it's mainstreaming a lot of the concepts that we found it hard before to defend.
So it's still a challenge that you have to encourage some people to think land value could perhaps be even higher if you added all these things in. Don't just think about your gleaming tower or your nice townhouses. Think about how the landscape is going to operate, because we all respond to that. We yearn for that.
And landscape is not only about today, it's also about tomorrow, because with climate resilience and climate risks, Sponge City is one of the concepts where you can have future proofing of your city. It's also about the future in terms of the young, because the youth will need a different type of spaces for them to come out of their screens. So what sort of hybrid experiences? How can you use technology to leverage your landscapes? The third one, and it's very, very important, and people rarely think about, is that as we become more and more entangled in the socio-economic system we are living on, nature is our savior. It has been doing it for billions of years, so we cannot do without it. We need to allow it to enter into our settlements and our ecosystems. As a species, we always put nature on the side. It's time to embrace nature and make it part of our everyday life.
I'm also struck today that, we were talking about inclusive neighbourhoods, about how Abu Dhabi has been thinking about how it takes care of the elderly and the less abled in our societies. So it's becoming a benchmark for that because it's building it in at the early stages of development. Is there a hope that whether it's Abu Dhabi or another nation in this region, that through your work, through their ambition to be attractive, to set benchmarks, that this could become a place where landscape architecture or landscape design or just landscape is valued perhaps more highly than elsewhere in the world?
I worked as an urban planning advisor in Abu Dhabi government in 2010. So the Abu Dhabi journey is a very much an organic journey that has been started with the Urban Planning Council, and it's magnificent for me after 12 years or 13 years to see that this foundation is still evolving and is still doing more work. We need to start it in the right way. And for me, I think what Abu Dhabi can set to others is these guidelines that were launched, the Urban Realm, Public Realm Guidelines, Urban Street Manual Guidelines. They were the foundation based on which initiatives are growing. Abu Dhabi 2030, it was done in 2010. So the combination between strategic and implementation ethos is very, very important. And yes, I think Abu Dhabi has given us a blueprint for how you can mainstream concepts that when they first started, they felt alien. So in 2010, when we did the public realm guidelines, we had the landscape guidelines within them. There was more than 6 manuals launched in 2010. We're now 2025. So it's evolving. So setting the foundation right is important. Setting your governance right is important. And then it will take care of itself. Actually, it's like a plant. You need to plant the seed, water the plant over time, but do not bring a plant from outside and just plant it.
One of the projects here on display was Bloom Living, a large-scale, gated, master-planned community in Zayed City in Abu Dhabi, developed by Bloom Holding. Inspired by Mediterranean Spanish architecture, it will have some 4,500 homes, including villas, townhouses and apartments. At its heart is a town centre plaza, pedestrian-friendly areas, cafes, retail and schools. To find out more about it, I was joined by Bloom Holding CEO Carlos Joaquim.
It's a development over 2.2 million square meter of land. It's around 4,200 units going from apartments to townhouses to villas. The way Bloom is positioning itself is as a main community developer. So when we started our development 2-3 years ago, the trend in the market was going towards the price point of the units. Now the market is asking for 500,000 dirham units. So let's do small studios and put them on the market and it will sell easily. We said, no, it's not going to be our approach. It's not even the approach of Abu Dhabi. So we looked at the human being itself. So we all know that humans are social creatures. They thrive and they live on communicating with each other. And this gives them the stability and the safety. And by looking at this side of the human being, we said, let's give the customers a nice place to live. So where can you put all these people together is in communities. So we started developing our biggest community now. And where do all these people meet? When we look at the people, we look at multi-generational community, like old people to children going through adults and families. We looked into the activities that are needed for the community. So this is why we invested a lot in the outdoors. If you look at the parks that we have there, we invested in more than 10 to 15% of the area is made of greenery, parks, and most importantly, it's all walkable, cyclable, and it's really pedestrian friendly, it's very safe, and it's even pet friendly. So you have all the needed activities. You have the tennis courts, football fields, you have even dog parks. You have a journey when you go through our parks. They are uninterrupted, so there is no interaction between the cars and the pedestrians or the cyclists. So within this community, we have schools. We have 2 main schools. Within this community, we have all the needed facilities that a community needs, from the supermarket to the clinic to the gym to the barber, the hairdresser, and the coffee shops and the restaurants. And the most important thing here is that anyone, a child, an old person, or an adult can go from any point in the project to any other point, either walk or cycle, and very safely.
And just tell me, I think that people would be surprised when they saw the model, because outsiders, when they think of the UAE, they think of skyscrapers, they think of people living on the 800th floor, and here you're building a low-rise, walkable neighborhood that actually, if you lived in Hamburg or you lived in Florida, you might recognize. There's something quite traditional about the setup. Is Abu Dhabi more focused on building a ground level and building this community infrastructure that you talk about?
Yes, and they are leading this by setting up rules of the density. So in Abu Dhabi, there is a very good and advanced urban planning where they really specify where you can build the towers or where you have to build communities. So on a 2.2 million square meter of land, we are only allowed to build 800,000 square meter. So if you distribute them, they make no more than 35 to 40% of the coverage. And if you take out the roads and the public facilities, what's left is greenery. So this is what I was saying. The greenery or the parks are between 10 to 20% of this project for the people to breathe.
There's an overarching plan, 2030, that people have worked towards, and beyond that, there are strict codes about environment and sustainability and meeting targets. How much does it help or restrict you as a developer? You know, you're part of the government process, but to have this clear kind of manifesto, as it were, of what needs to happen and when?
Look at the environmental awareness now, it became global. So it goes without saying that we have to participate and we have to support this direction. And this what reflects in our project. So as you said, it's not like a forest of towers. It's low rise with a lot of greenery around it. So when you walk on the street, if you have a cycling path, means that you are pushing people to use their bicycles to move around the community instead of jumping in their cars and moving around. This is one. Two, when you provide all this greenery for the people to be active and to do their sports and everything in the community, so there is a different approaches to the sustainability. Sustainability is not only about solar power or electric cars. It's about also a behavior and a lifestyle.
For our next interview, we turn to inclusive infrastructure, one of the key programs of this summit. The city's government is currently working on the People of Determination and Elderly Inclusive City project, which aims to do exactly what it says: create cities, neighbourhoods and towns with inclusive infrastructure, vital services and good mobility for all. Here to tell us more about it is Talal Faris, who's the Division Manager of Inclusive Communities at the Department of Community Development of Abu Dhabi.
As part of the Abu Dhabi Department of Community Development, we really talk about a dignified life for everybody who today is in Abu Dhabi, regardless of where they're originally from, regardless of their ability, whatever it is. We really want to make sure that everybody feels safe. Everybody feels not just that this is home, but that they're included and they're part of our community. That's what we mean high level when it comes to, let's just say, inclusivity. But we do know inclusivity has multiple parts. So the idea that today services and all types of services need to be inclusive, from education, from employment, from health. But also to support that and facilitate inclusivity, you need an infrastructure that's inclusive. You need mobility that's inclusive to everybody. So it really looks at it in multiple dimensions, but at the end of the day, it's really about ensuring that everybody today who is in Abu Dhabi feels at home and feels dignified and feels safe and protected to go about their day-to-day lives.
One of the fascinating things for people who are not from the region is, in the Emirates, still there's an amazing family structure that exists. The old age pensioners' homes. I don't know even if you have them for Emiratis, because people keep people in their families.
That's right.
Multi-generational, often living in a singular house or in a compound.
Yep.
So does that help you a little bit in making inclusive cities? Because there is a sense in which elderly people, for example, will be looked after better than in many Western countries.
Definitely there's an aspect whereby we're a very close family-oriented society. And that helps when we talk about inclusivity at the family level. But that still potentially could have an element of, because I'm with my family and because my family provides with me and we're very close as a family, I'm not as included in maybe events, let's just say, or I'm not included in community-based programs and that. So it's two parts. And I think that's what, you mentioned in terms of homes or, these kind of types of facilities. But one of our key things is really about not necessarily isolating or, having something dedicated for elderly. Not that they don't need it. Of course, there's certain services and things that they're focused on elderly or any specific type of population, but really about bringing them to the community, making sure that the events that we do within the community are inclusive in design and inclusive by nature so that anybody who comes to the event feels included.
at an event like this, which is about infrastructure and the future of infrastructure in Abu Dhabi, what kinds of questions are you trying to get onto the agenda with these companies building new homes, building places for entertainment, for leisure, hospitality, education? What kinds of things are you asking them to think about?
Again, I think we're doing that through what we've recently launched, which is the People of Determination, Elderly and Family-Friendly City project. And that's transforming Abu Dhabi through very clear parameters and pillars and questions. You're saying what types of questions? Through this very clear framework as to how we're actually going to transform Abu Dhabi. So within that one project we have now, we've piloted it at Yas Island. And we went there. We took people of determination of different disabilities to understand what are the challenges they face within Yas Island. And from that, we were then able to go with one of our key strategic partners, Al Dar, to say, here are some challenges. Here are what we think needs to be done. But that had to be grounded in some sort of framework. So we developed very specifically a People of Determination, city and kind of community-friendly framework that has these different parameters. So similar to today, what we have is the WHO age-friendly city. You have the UNICEF child-friendly city. So these are frameworks that in many ways have your questions and have your, drive what you need to be doing anyway. So we take that, we developed our own one, and collectively now all of put together, we're going now on the ground to our stakeholders and saying, okay, this is what we need. So in many ways, we're doing it in the opposite way. We're not asking them, we're kind of saying to them, this is what we need. This is how we're going to turn Abu Dhabi or Yas Island or whatever it may be into a really inclusive society.
For you, Talal, how do you say, okay, this is working, this is a success? I'm sure you have terrible things like KPIs and things.
Of course. Yeah.
So what are you trying to hit as a target?
I presented about half an hour ago, and again, there was a slide really about the framework that we're talking about is built on the theory of change. Today we know there's a challenge. We know that people today don't feel that they have access to everything the same way others do. What can we do through the framework? What are tangible things that are going to come out that are going to directly impact the city, be it inclusive gyms, inclusive malls, inclusive facilities, whatever it may be. And then how today do these beneficiaries of this new city, how does their subjective well-being improve? And that, you're hearing directly from the beneficiary. Once we hopefully are able to see subjective well-being go up, there you can hopefully say that we have made a positive impact. Similarly, economic participation, sports participation, whatever it may be, education, employment, we have all of these kinds of different measurement tools that will really hopefully help us at the end of our pilot, at the end of our first couple of years of the actual program, be able to say, you know what, we've achieved, or actually there's still areas to improve on.
As you've heard, livability was a topic high on the agenda here at the summit, all part of the city's 2030 vision, putting quality of life at the centre of its planning decisions. One person who's been working on making this a reality is Olivia Duncan, who's a senior urban strategist at the Department of Municipalities and Transport of Abu Dhabi.
What I do as an urban strategist, I'm applying quantitative science, qualitative, but also looking at what the community needs. So it's such an interesting analytical process that we are doing and documenting. And ultimately, why are we doing all this? So the leadership of Abu Dhabi can have a better informed, it's for evidence-based decision-making. So we are creating a baseline. We are scoring the entire capital. And then we are able to demonstrate what is the impact on people's quality of life of building that park at that time.
Just tell me a couple of things. So first of all, when you begin to collect this data for a neighbourhood, what kind of parameters are you looking at? Because, we do a city survey, Monocle does it every year, and we have set things that we're looking for, the softer side of city living, as well as the hard things, the infrastructure that makes a city work. Are you collecting similar data points to what other people would collect, or are there specific data points that you're looking at in a Middle East, in a UAE context that you think are important for these communities to thrive?
I think we're doing both. We have our own manuals. So we align with all of the DMT planning manuals. Our survey is very much focused on parks, cycle tracks, sidewalks, outdoor sports courts, and bus stops. So whatever is within DMT's realm, because DCD has the scope to access surveys. We can't just go out there and ask everybody anything. There's a quality of life survey that goes out every year, and when we piggyback on other people's data, right? So we're always collaborating. So whatever DCD is capturing, we look at that. We are very much interested in how this society is unique and it's not necessarily replicable. So every individual district is so different. So the level of granularity of our work, I'm so proud of it because we're mapping so much data, but we are creating something novel.
When you're here in Abu Dhabi, there are communities which are old communities, as it were, for Abu Dhabi, the places that have been around since the 70s and 80s. There are places where it's perhaps trickier to get around on a bicycle even now or in a wheelchair, where there wasn't originally a provision for green space. So are you putting forward data that people will now retrofit neighbourhoods and plug into the new communities being built?
That was a perfect question. I'm so glad you asked because we are on Livability 2.0. So we are like now revamping the first edition of Livability Approach. And that's a perfect thing because livability is about completing the existing communities. So there are communities that need to be retrofit and others one that needs to be built from scratch. And the other interesting thing about our program is that as a consequence of all the scorings, it goes to leadership and we actually are able to get budget for capital projects, which is unheard of from different contexts when politicians are using the metrics for investment, right? But for us, we are kind of justifying the need to build community serving facilities, refurbishment of sidewalks. So we send our inspectors, we have municipal inspectors, they follow a very thorough questionnaire where we geolocate every single score. And it's super granular. If you think about it, like we would have a score of this whole sidewalk here. And then based on that score, we can collect the photos and we can see, well, if the mandate is to increase wheelchair access, we are able to then locate where should we prioritize this ramping. For me, this is super detailed for livability level strategy.
But when we talk about healthier communities, it's important to address not just the buildings themselves, but what goes inside them too. That's one of the things guiding the work of interior designer Christina Zanuck. She joined Monocle's Carlotta Rebello earlier to tell her more about the role that interior design can have in enhancing how we live in our cities.
Having sort of established different offices, our offices do different things. So we have 3 offices that are purely design-centric, and that would be Thailand as well as London and Dubai. And what's really important is that our teams are very diversified. Like in terms of culture, our Dubai office has 27 different cultures out of 50 people. And same in London, it's a very diversified place. So I think there's also a lot of training ground. So as our projects start to develop in the Middle East, and particularly in Saudi Arabia, we have an office in Riyadh that really does help the team work on these cultural aspects, because I think that's really important, especially when there's a lot of sensitivities, whether it's religious or whether it's the way people live, the way they use their homes and so forth. So there's a lot of guidance from our various offices. So we really collaborate together internally just to sort of guide each designer. So it's really interesting. We have our Bangkok team, a lot of Asian designers working on Middle Eastern projects, and I think they've become great experts on what's expected here as well, because they've just open-minded. We have to be open-minded and just experiment as well.
I'm really curious about this role that interior design can have and has in shaping our cities for the better. You know, we're talking about creating healthier, more livable cities, and it's a big part of the conversation and it's needed.
Yeah, well, today I just finished a panel and we were talking about the evolution of design as well in cities and particularly in residential, and we are seeing such a different kind of move towards this wellness-centric type of design, and whether it's health and well-being, you know, before it's air purification, allowing breezes to come through spaces and lots of light and things like that. But now it's amenities, service, you know, all these type of elements that sort of start to play and shape different types of residential, whether it's villas or non-branded. So I think this is kind of an important part where we actually play a different role, where we can actually enhance design by considering these factors, you know, rather than just a builder or a developer just doing something without thoughtful design. And I think the more and more we also push quality, you know, quality of space, the way it's utilized, the way we move through space. I think these are all factors that I think that's the benefit of having an interior designer.
I want to turn to the role of craftsmanship, because I know that's hugely important for you and your projects. Why is it so important to implement traditional techniques, work with local artisans? Why is that such a core part of the work you do?
Depends on the project. And I think for hotels, craftsmanship is so integrated into the process. And, we're working on a beautiful hotel in Riyadh at the moment as part of that Diriyah development. And just learning about Najdi design and how columns are placed, the colors of, the developments and how we incorporate that from an interior perspective. It's so important having those craftsmen. But, more and more we're losing touch with this, and it's such a shame. So if we can preserve culture and also craftsmanship in our projects through different ways of using materials, or maybe it's even through art and sculpture in developments, and I think that's important, and we can do that.
Where do you draw your inspiration from? Because as we've been hearing, you're a very global-minded person and you travel for work regularly. So where do you draw inspiration from?
Inspiration's really drawn about the place where we're at, and it's that sense of place we're always trying to create. And, as you hear more, we create narratives and stories of projects which really incorporate whether it's a heritage location or the social aspects of a place, even down to the physical aspect. And I think more and more, these are sort of the true elements that we try and incorporate within our design. So we don't really follow fashion and trend, and I think that's really important. We look for longevity in design, authenticity as well, depending on the hotel or the development that we're working on. So, yeah, there's lots of inspiration. You could just walk outside and you'll, gain inspiration on a lot of things, or patterns. And especially here, I think in the Middle East, it's very pattern orientated, back from the sort of traditional mashrabiyah patterns that used to sort of create patterns for floors and so forth. But now we're actually deconstructing these patterns and coming up with this new language, design language, which I think is kind of lovely as well. So, yeah, lots of inspiration everywhere.
You've spoken about, the importance of community, quality of life, particularly in hospitality projects. I'm curious if our lessons from that can be scaled up to a neighborhood level, because at a time that we are prioritizing quality of life, mental health in cities, are there lessons that, the more per se built environment can take from wellness in an interior design setting?
Definitely, bringing inside out and bringing sort of green areas in, more internal courtyards. How we sleep is really important. Blackout of lighting, to really get a better night's sleep. Acoustics. I think these are sort of factors that when you work on hospitality projects, they're key elements that we have to consider. And as we start to move into different residential or branded residential, a lot of these principles are starting to form part of that design ethos. And, lighting, your own circadian rhythm and how you sort of interact with light. That's, again, such a big factor in the way we design. So, yeah, lots of lessons learned. And I think when hoteliers have been doing this for a long time, there's a lot of cues that we can take in terms of the built environment and how we can actually make our cities a lot more livable and a lot more social as well, and what you incorporate in these particular developments, not just a clubhouse as it was, there's lots of amenities, things for kids to do as well. This is an area, paddle tennis is now, we're sort of adding that into a lot of the hotel developments. There are these social things where people can get together.
If there's one thing we know about Abu Dhabi, is that this is a destination more than just a city. And much of that good reputation can be attributed to the work of Miral, the leisure and entertainment company responsible for developments such as Yas Island and the upcoming Disney resort in the city. Mohammed Abdullah Al-Zabi is the CEO of Miral, and he stopped by our pop-up radio studio to tell me everything we need to know about creating an entertainment destination powerhouse.
Yas Island is an incredible story that we're very proud of. In 18 years only, we have managed to create one of the best entertainment destinations in the world. With our collaboration with our partners, Yasmin Circuit and the Dar, and Miral, we have built a very unique destination. We have built a restaurant, which was opened in 2009, and then Yas Mall, along with Ferrari World, which was opened in 2010, and then Yas Water World, golf course, Warner Brothers, and recently we opened SeaWorld, and much, much more to come. And of course, the recent announcement, which is Disney Land, that will come to Yas Island as well.
Now, this is an infrastructure summit, but what's fascinating is that the focus here on these 2 days, a lot of it is about what you might call the softer sides of urbanism, about play, enjoyment, entertainment. How important do you see your role in building Abu Dhabi as not just as a place for tourists and entertainment, but helping create an identity for Abu Dhabi.
We play a crucial role here in building Abu Dhabi's tourism market. As you know, that the vision of Abu Dhabi is to increase contribution of tourism to our GDP. Today, it's around 90 billion dirham, and we want to increase that to as much as 15% of our GDP by 2030. We want to add 183,000 jobs in the coming 5 to 6 years. And we want also to attract more tourists to come and reach 39 million of visitors to Abu Dhabi. To achieve that, we need to build more theme parks, more attractions, and most importantly, we want to increase length of stay on our hotels and our destinations, Saadiyat and Yas Island, to let our customers enjoy different experiences. Just imagine with me in 10 years' time how this will look like. We have 5 museums in Saadiyat, and that is only 10 to 15 minutes far from Yas Island, which will have 5 theme parks and international attractions, and that will be only 30 minutes far from Dubai by railway. Connect that with 2 busiest airports around the world, which will be Al Maktoum Airport, that will have more than 200 passengers to the airport, and Zayed International Airport, which will have 50 million passengers to come. What a unique proposition, what a unique master plan.
The transport infrastructure is going to be important for helping you maintain those numbers. You've talked about the rail line coming in from Dubai. When you think about your plan, I presume you're having to work very closely with transportation, with the airlines. It's not a company that sits on its own developing just buildings.
We are very privileged here in Abu Dhabi. I was asked just today in the conference, what makes Abu Dhabi unique? And I said that it's a very unique proposition, and decision-making is incredibly fast here. The layers of decision is very close and very less. It's very fast. We collaborate. We work closely with our partners. I give example. We have bi-weekly meeting with Department of Municipality, Department of Culture Tourism to discuss infrastructure for Saadiyat and what other challenges. And all decisions are making on the spot to make the customer experience more convenient and easier to come and arrive. We always put customer experience as our priority. And that is the reason why we are successful today in both destinations, Yas and Saadiyat.
And finally, we turn to the architect Emre Arolat, whose work fuses cultural heritage with contemporary design and a commitment to sustainability. We wanted to hear about how architecture can shape meaningful, functional spaces that enhance urban life, and also the affinity that Turkish architects have with this region.
There are mainly 2 paths on architectural design. I mean, one of them is creating always your own object with your own architectural tendencies and way of doing. But this is a very specific one. So when you see a building in Bilbao or in New York in somewhere else, you can clearly understand that this is this architect. The second way of doing architecture, in my opinion, architectural design, is being more concerned about context and understanding the values of specifics of context and always trying to get deeper into the environment and into the distinctive qualities of the place. So I was like at the second path normally. I mean, I believe in that kind of architecture, not creating object of desire every time, but somehow being able to become a response to the needs. I mean, this can be seen as more pragmatic thing, but this is not, in my opinion, because it's always very specific and it's always worth to work on very meticulously specific sociological, historical, and the other layers of an environment of a city.
You've built museums, you've done all sorts of architectural projects. Is this the same process you bring to the work that you do, that you don't arrive with any preconceived notions what the outcome should be? You see the land, you see the community and think, okay, where do we begin?
It's always important, this first process of, I'm calling it understanding, having some extract from the context and creating some specific questions for the project and trying to find some responses to these questions. I mean, this is a long process of design, in my opinion. I mean, in our case, in EAA architecture, trying to be global, but at the same time very specific on context and local. It's not very easy, but with my very talented designer colleagues, I think we are doing our best.
Emery, tell me, words like sustainability, they can mean everything and nothing, but let's say it means a lot, and I know it does to your work. When you think about this concept of sustainability, are you looking at global targets? Are you thinking about those measures? What kinds of things are you thinking about when you approach a project? You think, okay, this needs to be sustainable in the sense that it can remain here for a long time, that it can fit in with the environment. What kind of challenges are in your brain when you look at a project?
Yeah, actually, 5 years ago, when you talk about sustainability, the meaning was somehow more environmental sustainability. But I believe that the meaning of sustainability is a kind of large platform, because when you say sustainability about a building or about a project, it should be sustainable on economics, sustainable on sociologics. The project should be sustainable, of course, environmentally as well. But at the end of the day, there are hundreds of different items to be checked on a project to become a sustainable one. So it's not about having a LEED certificate or something like that, but it's about community. It's about creating a landmark for community. And when I say landmark, it's not something like very well looking or very handsome, but somehow very well embraced and very well used. So I believe that sustainability comes with usage, in my opinion. We cannot say that there's a recipe for sustainability, achieving to sustainability in every project. Like all the other items of design, sustainability is one of them, and you have to work on this in a very meticulous way to achieve.
Tell me, when it comes to the next stages for architecture and design, we know the endless conversation about AI, about new technology and all of these things. How much is that shaping your day-to-day now?
As an architect, we have to convey our ideas to the clients or to the users. So it's not always easy for us to prepare something very quickly to convey our ideas or to convey our main approach. And AI, in my opinion, helps us on this. But for the further stages, we don't use too much. Of course, technological-wise, all the engineering groups that we work together, they are using these technologies in a larger manner than we do in architecture. But I believe that AI will be a game changer for our profession as well.
Well, that's all for this week's episode of The Urbanist, coming to you from the Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit. My thanks to all our guests for joining us on the show. For more from the summit, subscribe to the podcast or head over to monocle.com. The Urbanist is produced by Colin Rebello and by David Stevens, who also edits this show. This episode also had editing assistance from Steph Chungu, here with us in Abu Dhabi too. I'm Andrew Tuck. Goodbye, and thank you for listening, City Lovers.
On The Urbanist, we're always asking what makes a city truly livable. This September, find some answers in Barcelona as Monocle hosts its annual Quality of Life conference. 3 days of panels, ideas and good conversation with global mayors, architects and policy pioneers, all over good food and a glass of something local. Find out more and book your seat at monocle.com/conference.